everybody, this is JDGaming, back today after a very long hiatus, which I've kind of explained up in this video. I'll link in the top right hand corner, and I'm here to bring you guys Plant Link featuring Rikka. So lots been going on in my life. I gave you like a 10-minute video or so, but honestly I could talk for at least an hour about the topic, as I've done with a lot of friends and family in the last few months here. It's been kind of rough with my job, that's why I ultimately quit, but I think it was a better decision for my overall well-being, and I'm very happy to be back here, not only with my own life, but also with you guys. You know, this has been a big hobby, and I can't wait to share a lot of this stuff with you. That said, part of the reason why I didn't upload for a while was because I couldn't really find something that worked. I talked about in my video on the Gap my struggles with 𝕮𝖊𝖊𝖓𝗙, and after that I was very tempted to post another video in a similar vein regarding sunk costs and my thoughts of giving up on Rikka, which I'd been playing around with for a long time. That theme is definitely the misfit out of Secret Slayers. 𝕿𝖊𝖙𝖊𝖐 is still crazy. Emancipators are still decent even after Block Dragon getting hit, but Rikka never really saw any immediate success, and I played around with the theme extensively. I think it's cool that you can do some cheat out rank 4s into other plant ranks. With our new Strenna, we have access to a good rank 6 and rank 8 engine, but all those pieces don't really feel cohesive to me, and I just wasn't happy with how the deck was going. I was ready to abandon it, but playing around with plants, as I love so much, as you've seen on this channel, I was able to find a build of the deck that I really liked, where you use Primula as a level 4 water plant monster, and you're able to augment the normal plant link combos in a way that you couldn't without this very specific monster. So this is going to be a let's build. As always, I'll explain my choices and build the deck from the ground up, sharing my reasoning along the way so you guys can explore this theme for yourselves, even if you've never looked at it before. And there is a pretty good chance that sometime down the line I'll do a more dedicated Rikka build, even if it's part of that engine, not just a plant link deck like this. If you just want to see the completed list, you can of course use the YouTube chapter system, as is now a new thing, to look at the last segment of the video, or I have the individual timestamps in the table of contents in the description box down below, as I always have. But without further ado, let's build Rikka Plant Link. The first step in building a deck is to establish a theme and to build a core that supports the theme's goals. And whereas this deck does start off with a very strong combo we're going to showcase here, do realize that Plant Link is a very flexible deck. It doesn't have to be linear, much like the old school Plant Synchro decks that I really loved. This deck has a lot of branching plays, and the more familiar you are with the pieces, the better equipped you will be to take advantage of these options when the situation arises. But of course, just like any other plant deck, our very first card we're starting off with is a full playset of Lone Fire Blossom, just a level 3 500 attack, 1400 defense monster that lets you tribute it or another plant monster once per turn in order to summon another plant from your deck. But the cool thing is, it's not a hard once per turn, and that will become very relevant in just a little bit here. So we're going to start off with our Lone Fire Blossom and summon out our one copy of 𝕿𝗔𝖆𝖊𝖏𝑇𝖑, which will let us send a monster from our hand to the graveyard upon normal or special summon, and then that will let us summon one of our 2 𝕮𝖊𝖊𝖐𝐽𝐵𝑟. Now I know this looks very, very weird, but in extensive testing, I found that there are some ways you can combat hand traps effectively if you're using Lone Fire Blossom, but not so much if you normal summon your 𝕿𝗔𝖆𝖏𝑇𝑑. I'll talk about that a little more later in this video, but for that reason, I liked only having one copy of this just to combo off through Lone Fire. If you draw it, great, it's not a dead card, but 𝕮𝖊𝖐𝐽𝐵𝑟 I specifically wanted 2 of, because with it being so central to the deck, you end up screwing yourself over if you do draw the one copy, and even if that is only one in a handful of games, that's still a handful too many, and I did like the second copy because it never seemed dead. If you draw it, just discard it off of this 𝕿𝗔𝖆𝖏𝑇𝑑, and you're never really in a bad situation. From here, triggering this effect will allow you to have 2 monsters on the field, as well as access our one copy of Instant Fusion, and this is something we're going to hang on to here, because by paying 1,000 life points, we can of course summon a low-level fusion monster from our extra deck, and that's going to let us combo off here in just a bit. By using Predaplant, 𝕮𝖊𝖐𝐽𝐵𝑟, and 𝕿𝗔𝖆𝖏𝑇𝑑 together, we can summon our Cross Sheep because it just needs 2 monsters with different names, and then its ability will trigger depending on the kind of monsters you have on your field that it's pointing to when something is summoned to one of its zones. And basically, you can kind of see the combo here. By activating Instant Fusion, we can go ahead and summon a copy of Mud Dragon of the Swamp, a level 4 water monster with the ability to protect other monsters of the same attribute, and can even mold its own attribute to protect other kinds of monsters, but by summoning this fusion monster here, we trigger the effect of Crush Sheep, and at resolution, this will allow us to go and revive any level 4 or lower monster in our graveyard without summoning it to a zone it points to necessarily, and without negating its effect. So now we're able to bring back our Lone Fire Blossom, and you can see how here this ends up becoming bigger and better combos. At this point, we can do a lot of things depending on what we've drawn as extenders in our hand, but I do want to say, even if you've not drawn anything else, if you just started with that Lone Fire and an effect monster to discard, or any monster really to discard off of that 𝕵𝗍𝗬𝗍, you contribute your Lone Fire Blossom to ensure that you see a copy of our very important Primula, the Rikka Fairy. This is a level 4 water monster, plant, 800 attack, 1800 defense, and she reads, if a monster you control is tributed, except during the damage step, you could special summon this card from your hand in defense position. So you can see already though, even if you have this card in your hand, Lone Fire Blossom can fetch something else useful like Spore, for example, and Primula will activate in your next chain, summoning herself to the field, which will be an extra body. You can also, as a bonus effect that you don't use too often in this particular build, target up to 2 plant monsters you control and increase their levels by 2 until the end of the turn. You can only use each effect of Primula once per turn, and that effect's a lot more useful in the pure Rikka deck or more dedicated Rikka builds, where you're actually turning your level 4 into a 6, your level 6 into an 8, and so on, and you could see how that deck starts being able to put together its rank 6 and 8 combos off of its rank 4 and 6 combos. But right now, all we care about is the fact that this is a free body that we get off of Lone Fire Blossom, and as a level 4 water monster and another level 4 water monster, we can now go ahead and overlay these two, which will let us cheat out one of the dumbest Xyz monsters that's still allowed in our game, 𝕵𝗍𝖄𝐻, which of course lets us detach a material from the card in order to summon out a low rank water monster like Totally Awesome, and then from here you can go ahead, use whatever extenders you have. Maybe you have that Spore, maybe you have an extra body, and then you can combine Crush Sheep and 𝕵𝗍𝖄𝐻, for example, into something huge like an 𝕵𝗍𝖄𝐻 or whatever else may fit your fancy depending on the situation that you're in. So this is a really cool thing you're able to do just because Crush Sheep lets you go and bring out your Lone Fire Blossom, and that leads into further plays as an awesome launch pad. You're able to very consistently bring out your 𝕵𝗍𝖄𝐻 to make sure Totally Awesome ensures your boards stick, and of course this gives you enough bodies to continue building up into a link strategy as well. So this is kind of the bread and butter combo we're starting off with, but how else can we make it better? That's what we're going to take a look at next. Whereas Lone Fire Blossom is a very powerful card, it obviously suffers from a lot of weaknesses like being susceptible to hand traps and just the fact that what if you don't draw it? You can't play your combo. And that's why I wanted to have another big piece of this deck, and we're starting off here with 3 copies of Evil Thorn. This is a level 1 plant monster, low, negligible stat line for the most part, that lets you go and tribute this card to inflict 300 damage to your opponent, and if you do, you could summon 2 more copies, or up to 2 really if you've already drawn one, of Evil Thorn from your deck in attack position, but those effects cannot be activated that turn. So Evil Thorn is an important card here because it lets you put 2 plant monsters on the field very easily. You can see that because this card tributes itself, it gets itself off the field, which will be relevant down the line when I talk about how to play around your opponent's hand traps, and it triggers the effect of Primula, which is such an important card in this specific build of the deck that in addition to the one we saw, we will be playing an additional pair, so it's going to be a full 3 copies of Primula in this deck to ensure that we get it off of Evil Thorn or Lone Fire Blossom, and then to make sure we see her every single time, we're also going to be playing 3 copies of 𝕮𝖊𝖊𝖓, which is the last Rikka card in here, and that's why I think this is more of a featuring Rikka deck more so than an actual Rikka deck. This is basically your Rhoda. When you activate the spell, you can also tribute a plant monster, which in this deck you will never do. Add a Rikka monster from your deck to your hand. Then if you tributed a monster when you activate this card, you could take a plant monster with the same original level as that Rikka monster with a different name, not necessarily even from the Rikka archetype, and add that from your deck to your hand as well. You can only activate 1 𝕮𝖊𝖓𝖓 per turn. In this deck, because you're only playing Primula, you're not able to really do that much else with the strategy here. You're not playing any other level 4 plants either, so you can't really fetch that. So there's no real reason to tribute a monster for a 𝕮𝖊𝖓𝖓, but This is just another powerful way that you can make sure you get your Primula. It's good enough, I think, even beyond the 𝕿𝖆𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖓 play, just being a free body, that it warrants playing 6 copies total of this card. I've never really felt that it was dead. It's always flexible. Worst case scenario, it becomes another plant monster you can discard off of the 𝕿𝖆𝖊𝖑𝖑𝖊𝖓. So we're playing 6 copies there, and now, using possibly Primula, but definitely the 𝕿𝖆𝖊𝖑𝖄rns, we can go for a number of our link monsters. For example, we can go 𝕮𝗿𝐺𝗳𝗊𝖓𝖙𝖊𝖓𝖙𝖘 Jasmine, which needs 2 plant monsters, has a bonus effect where if your life is higher than your opponent's, this card and any plants it points to can't die in battle, and the more important effect is you could tribute a monster this card points to special summon any plant monster from your deck in defense position. It doesn't negate the effect like Lone Fire Blossom, so you're able to go ahead and summon out anything from your deck. That is a hard once per turn, and then there is a bonus you're probably never going to use unless your opponent upstarts you or something, where if you happen to gain life, you can add a plant monster from your deck to your hand. However, interesting to note, that first effect is sometimes relevant because 𝕿𝖆𝖊𝖑𝖏 burning your opponent for 300 does make your opponent go behind you from starting life. If you play Instant Fusion, though, of course, that gets flipped behind, so that's why that first effect isn't always relevant, but it is interesting in that you're able to bring out other monsters from your deck to make sure your combo works. This basically means any duplicate plants you get in your deck are able to be turned into Lone Fire Blossom, which boosts the overall consistency. But you may be looking at it and thinking, JD, you need a monster to tribute. How are you going to turn 𝕿𝖆𝖊𝖑𝖏 into this thing and then have something else to tribute? And that's where one of my new favorite plant cards comes in. From Eternity Code, we got a really cool world premiere card called Rose Girl. This is an Earth level 3 plant tuner monster with 800 attack, 600 defense. And she has 2 amazing abilities that aren't broken in and of themselves, but are just so powerful for plants. The first effect is if a face-up plant monster or monsters you control is sent to the graveyard, except during the damage step, that's for any reason, link summon or battle or whatever, you can special summon this card from your hand as an activated effect, which is really cool because this is basically like 3 more copies of Primula. You can't go into 𝕿𝖆𝖇𝖑𝖏 with this, but it's a tuner monster, which means, as we'll talk in a second, you can go for things like 𝕿𝗁𝐽𝒑𝐊𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵. The other ability, as an exclusive ability where you can use one or the other, is if a plant monster is on the field and this card is in your graveyard, you can add this card from your graveyard to your hand. Again, only one of these effects per turn and only once that turn, but it's also cool here how extra copies of this aren't dead, because let's say you go ahead and use your 𝕿𝗏𝐴, discard a copy of Rose Girl for that effect, and then you basically Sinister Serpent this card back immediately without it getting banished or anything, and it's free discard fodder for something else that you may need to for ammo, as we'll talk about later as well. But the fact that this is a tuner monster, plant monster, keeps coming back, puts itself on the board, overall this card is just absolutely awesome for plants. I love this card so much, and we're going to be taking full advantage of it right now in a format with Crystron 𝕿𝗁𝐽𝒑𝐊𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵, which you can easily see will let us go for something like Spore, and then that lets us get at least another body in play. You could go for Synchro monsters as well. Originally, I was playing Mudan, which is the level 6 Rikka fairy. She's able to bring out your Rikka Glamour as well as your other traps from the set, so it's a pretty interesting way to build. I just felt there wasn't a need to really play that level 6, but back when I was, Spore could banish the level 6 monster, bringing itself back as a level 7, and then back then I also played Link Cross, and you'd be able to use one of the tokens plus level 7 Spore to bring out a Borreload Savage Dragon, which is a nice Omni Negate you could throw on top of the Totally Awesome and everything. Again, I just didn't like the inconsistency of having a pretty redundant level 6 monster that you have to tribute a monster to even start off. But Spore is still very awesome as just level 1 monster, so you can use Link Kuriboh with it and just get your plays off that way. You can go ahead and just bring it back as a free body. It's a tuner, so you can go into 𝕿𝗁𝐽𝒑𝐊𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵, or of course you can bring it off of 𝕿𝗁𝐽𝒑𝐊𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵, and it's basically like what you'd use a Jet Synchron or a Plague Spreader or a Deskbot 1 for. So very much just an extender in this deck, makes it very easy to continue going off. And then there's the fact that sometimes you get stopped, so what do you do there? That's where we play Predaplant Verte Anaconda, because much like how if you just draw Red Eyes Fusion, you're kind of stuck and you just play the Red Eyes Fusion, sometimes you summon 𝕿𝗆𝖊𝖑𝖏 and you don't have an extender. It's very unlikely when you have 3 Rose Girls, 3 Rikka Glamour, and 3 Primula, but sometimes it does happen. And in that instance, you're able to just combine any 2 of your effect monsters into Anaconda, pay 2,000 life points, send Red Eyes Fusion to the graveyard, which of course lets us send our Dark Magician and our Red Eyes Black Dragon, and we're playing our Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Now, before you go, all up in arms saying, oh, JD, you're just jumping on the bandwagon, playing Dark Dragoon because this card's good. I mean, yeah, this card is very good, and in testing I found rather than playing other extenders as one-off monsters I could play, I'd rather start off by playing this very powerful engine. It's the best thing I can put out with any 2 scrap monsters, even if my plays get stopped. And let's be honest, if you're playing Lone Fire Blossom and 𝕵𝖊𝖊𝖏 in 2020, you need all the help you can get because your cards are going to be stopped in a lot of games by hand traps, and you need to make a play. And this allows you to do that if you have like an 𝕵𝖊𝖊𝖏 and then you have no extender beyond that, or you know, you get effect failure, infinite permanence. Now you just drop any extender and you can turn them into this card. So it's just a safety net. I never really found having these vanillas in here was that bricky, despite the fact that we are playing something else that would make you think that. And to ensure we get all of the plays I just mentioned off, we're playing 3 copies of 𝕮𝖫𝖊𝖏𝖑. This is the most recent addition to the deck. I actually made the change last week, which relative to the 2 months I've been working on this deck is a very, very recent time. But this card is just awesome because it lets you special summon it from your hand 1 at a time at any time during your turn. And that's really powerful because that means if you have a Jasmine and your opponent has gotten rid of your other monsters so you don't have a thing to tribute, you just summon 𝕮𝖊𝖏𝑇𝖑. If you go ahead and you have your effect failure or 𝕵𝖊𝖊𝖏𝖏, again, not effect failure, your Lone Fire or 𝕵𝖊𝖊𝖏𝖏 gets hit by an impermanence, just drop 𝕮𝖊𝖏𝑇𝑑, go for your Dragoon play. It just makes sure that you have an extra body. It's the most flexible thing you can do. 𝕮𝖊𝖏𝑇𝑑 is great, but again, there's a specific reason I talked about 𝕮𝖊𝑇𝑑, and that's where we'll talk about in the next section here, where we're basically going to talk about what else are we doing to finish out the deck. But for right now, 𝕮𝖊𝑇𝑑 or some other extender like 𝕮𝖊𝑇𝑑, something else, will help you make sure your plays stick in some capacity. As promised, it's now time to talk about all the tech that we're using to finish out this deck. And the main reason I'm playing Lone Fire Blossom, 𝕵𝖊𝖊𝖏𝑇𝑑, and Rikka Glamour, and all these other cards like 𝕮𝖫𝖊𝑇𝑑 is because of hands down the most powerful hand trap we have in our game right now. 𝕮𝖓𝖊𝖏𝖑𝖊𝖏 requires you to have no monsters, of course, in order to activate its devastating ability, which lets you block any monster effect, which is crippling during your opponent's first turn if they're going first, and just absolutely nuts during your first turn if your opponent hits you with a hand trap, because you get an extra body on board, all your plays now have 2 extra monsters, so that 𝕵𝖊𝖏𝖏𝑇𝑑 can easily have 4 materials. You can make sure you have a body to tribute for your Aromaseraphy Jasmine. This card is just a really powerful 3-of engine in this deck. It makes everything just so much more powerful. And the cool thing is, again, if you get hit by an effect failure, okay, sure, you're going to leave your 𝕵𝖊𝖊𝖏𝑇𝑑 or your Lone Fire on the field, and that's why I needed some kind of an extender. And I chose 𝕮𝖫𝖊𝖏𝑇𝑑 because if I play 𝕮𝖊𝑇𝑑, I drop that first, I no longer have a blank field. However, because Lone Fire Blossom and Effect Failure can, or not Effect Failure, I keep saying that, Lone Fire Blossom and 𝕵𝖊𝖊𝖏𝑇𝑑 can tribute themselves off and get themselves off the field, much like how you could just activate Rikka Glamour with nothing else on your board. You can easily play around Ash Blossom. That card is a joke against this deck now, whereas back in the day, Ash Blossom was the doom that just ended your turn and you just lost the game if you saw that card. So really, really powerful card. Obviously, a lot of people are playing this now. This is probably the best hand trap staple at the moment, but it's especially powerful here because all of your key cards interact with this engine in such a way that you're never really in trouble as your first play. Sure, you can't stop subsequent plays as easily, but if you draw this card, you're basically just fine. And even if you draw the driver, that's just a free body you can discard off of your 𝕵𝐿𝐹 Scorpio and continue making your plays. Again, this thing is a vanilla. It's a brick in theory. Red Eyes and Dark Magician are technically bricks. Don't discard them like I did once when I first played that engine, because you'll screw yourself over. You can't Red Eyes Fusion anymore from your graveyard. But I digress. These effect monsters, or these vanilla monsters rather, weren't that bad to draw. And so I found it was actually worth playing this engine as well because of how flexible it is in stopping your opponent's plays and making sure my own go through. Then we are playing 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, and that's it. Just 6 effect negators as hand traps to start off, in case your opponent's going first, and I'll talk about why in just a moment. But this is the next best thing you can add. It's more flexible than Effect Failure. If you want to play Veiler, that's totally fine as well. I think it still works. I just personally love Impermanence, and I feel if you have it, you play it over Veiler. It's just my choice there. Then we play Emergency Teleport as just a single extra extender. You're playing Gamma anyway, and between Gamma and 𝗣𝗍𝖊𝖓𝖏, you could pull out extra copies so that you never really dead draw them. Even if you did, again, you could always discard or do whatever, but I do like having Teleport in here. I mean, you guys know I love Psychics, and this card is just really flexible here if you're playing Gamma anyway. No reason not to play this to further your plays, especially because the tuner monster can go for 𝗣𝗍𝖊𝖓𝖏. We have Called by the Grave, which is honestly got no business being at 1, but that's the game we're playing right now, so we're still playing it because you want to stop all the hand traps you can. Not being able to stop Gamma actually made me want to cut this at some point, but, you know, it's still good against Ash Blossom in case you don't draw the Gamma. Just one other way you could stop your opponent's plays. Plus, it's flexible because, of course, you can get rid of your opponent's combo pieces during their turn and shut things out for an entire turn cycle. A better version of Called by the Grave right now, ironically, is Monster Reborn, which lets you go ahead and do the same cross-sheep-like combos off of your Lone Fire Blossom. Absolute staple in this type of a plant deck, so you got to make sure you play this thing because it's so flexible. Bring out Lone Fire for any combo piece, toolbox out of your deck, bring back something like a Link monster, and then keep climbing that way, cheating out more than one Link rating of monster. This card is just good, so you got to play it for that. 1-for-1, I've been back and forth on with this card, but between Spore, Jester Confit, and Evil Thorn, I feel that it is a worthwhile card to play. This is cool because even though you have to discard a card, which is technically a minus to do, you have a bunch of redundant cards you can get rid of that add to the overall consistency of the strategy. And by playing 1-for-1 first, if you get hand trapped, you're fine because you could still normal summon and go off. It's just one more disruption you can get rid of from your opponent, and if they do have disruptions, you know, it becomes an extender potentially also. So this is a very flexible card that also lets you take advantage of your Gamma. And then the last 3 cards I like playing are a single copy of Rose Lover, which is basically just if you happen to draw this, or you summon it off of your Aromatherapy Jasmine, you're able to extend your plays further because if you have a plant in your hand, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon that plant, and in its unaffected by trap effects for the rest of the turn, which is pretty cool because that means, for example, you can normal this or tutor it out in some way, turn it into a Link 𝗮𝖏, which I'll just bring out here for it because I probably won't show it later. And then from there, you're able to banish Rose Lover, bring back Lone Fire, or from your hand, summon one, and then go off. You can't get impermed or anything, which is kind of nice there. It's not foolproof, that's why it's just a 1-of, but between this card, 1-for-1, you know, Spore, you have a lot of ways to bring out the 𝗮𝖏, which will send this to grave, and it just rounds everything out in a very nice way. Also a good discard, which is something I've been thinking about in this strategy because I like finishing everything off with 2 copies of Forbidden Droplet. I played 3 and I found with all the hand traps I have, I'd rather just play the 2 and I can side the 3rd copy. This card I feel is just a staple for the format, at least for a lot of the decks that I like playing. What it does is it's a quick play spell that says send any number of other cards from your hand and or field to the graveyard, choose that many effect monsters your opponent controls, and until the end of this turn, their attacks become halved and their effects are negated. In response to this card's activation, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects of cards with the same original type monster, spell, or trap as the cards you sent to the graveyard to activate this, and you can only activate 1 per turn. I like this so much more than Triple Tactics Talent, what I just sold my playset of, because that card, you're relying on your opponent to do something before you even do anything. And yes, it's a powerful card when it goes off. It's a bomb for sure. But this card is just so much more reliable. You could set it if you're going first. You can play it into a big board like Dark Ruler No More. There's a ton of cards in this deck that you want to send to the graveyard, like Rose Lover that I mentioned. You could be activating something like 1-for-1, Rikka Glamour, or Emergency Teleport and send that to the graveyard as a free card. You can get rid of extra monsters like the Psyframe Driver, any unnecessary extenders you may have in your hand, make things like Rose Girl go to the grave so you can Sinister Serpent that card back for free. There are just so many free cards that you can play this off of, either by activating spells or getting rid of monsters that are going to come back or be live anyway, that this card is just nuts. Being able to discard just 2 cards with this thing, or send, and then being able to blank your opponent's 2 monsters, 2 negates, and have them while preventing spells and monsters from responding is just enough to win games that you normally would not be able to, and I'm so glad that this card exists. I was originally playing 2 of this even before Called by the Grave got hit, but definitely now with Called gone, this is just a nice way, you know, you can play second safely, even without overloading your deck with hand traps and such. And it's just a very flexible card overall. So I honestly think if you got to make a choice between Forbidden Droplet and Triple Tactics Talent, because they're about the same price point right now, and you have it in your budget, I'd go for the Droplet. I feel like this card is just so much more versatile. You could play it in so many other strategies, as I'm going to show in the coming weeks. This thing is just absolutely one of my favorite new cards to come out of Rise of the Duelist. And that's saying a lot because I love the 𝕿𝖆𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖓 archetype. So, yeah, that's it for the main deck there, 40 cards. And then for the extra deck, just a handful of others I want to mention. Abyss Dweller is a no-brainer. You're playing water monsters anyway. You don't need 2 water monsters, which is nice, but if you have at least one, it gains 500 attack to 22. And just, it's a powerhouse, right? You don't go for a ton of rank 4s in the game. Like, maybe once a game you'll be able to do it. It's consistent, though, and shutting out your opponent's graveyard can just end the game entirely. And that's why I love playing this card, even though I very rarely bring it out against, like, my brother when I play against him, just because, you know, the matchup doesn't work. But that's not a reason to not play this card. It's just so good against Eldritch, good against so many other grave-based strategies. Just shutting that off as an extra hand that's gone is just insane. And in a similar vein, I like playing 𝕿𝖆𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖓𝖙. The idea here is if you summon this in defense position with a very easy summoning requirement of any 2 level 4 monsters, you're able to shut off any non-link based negation. So Borreload Savage is gone. You're able to shut down Dragoon. You're able to stop your opponent from doing things, even if it's just a little bit here. And it frees you up to be able to fight back, because I'd rather deal with just an 𝕿𝖆𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖓 and nothing else versus everything else they may throw at me. And so 𝕿𝖆𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖓𝑚 is kind of like Forbidden Droplet in a way, where you're able to just deal with an entire board of monsters all at once off of just one card. So that's why we play this. It's just very, very high impact cards. I'm not playing Tornado Dragon and other things because I don't want a varied rank 4 toolbox necessarily, because, you know, honestly, Toad is going to be better in most situations if I'm going first than like a Tornado Dragon would be. But Dweller and 𝕿𝖆𝖑𝖊𝖓 and Toad are just blowout cards, and that's why we play those specific monsters. And then the rest of the cards you want to put into Link monsters for flexibility. My other rank 2 or Link 2 monsters, Area. I love this card. I have a Starlight, but I'm just too afraid to play it. I'm sorry, guys. It's in my binder. But this card is just phenomenal because you're playing water monsters anyway, so you're able to summon off of any of your waters plus any other monster. And then it's able to steal your opponent's 𝕮𝖃 as long as that card stays meta relevant in most combo decks or most decks in general. You're able to summon that as a free rank 2 monster or Link 2 monster, and that means you can easily climb into Access Code Talker, which just needs 2 effect monsters and has mighty abilities that bring it up to at least 4,300 attack in this deck, and you're able to pop at least 2 cards as well, non-targeting destruction, and you can just run over Red Eye's Dark Dragoon also. So very powerful card in that Link 2 area. I love how good it is, and the fact that you can play it right now because of the meta, because of how this deck plays, is just a really cool thing. I just absolutely love it. I've already mentioned how 𝕿𝖆𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖓 is a star player in this deck, in any Plant Link deck really. It's just one of the best monsters you can bring out to form multiple negations off of the scrap monsters you have. And again, if you combine it with Totally Awesome, sure, you lose to Dark Ruler no more, and you lose to like Forbidden Drop, but I mean, what monster-based deck doesn't? 𝕿𝖆𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖓 is just one of the best value cards you can bring out very easily. And then the last card I put back in, this was the replacement for Link Cross once I realized Borreload Savage is gone, Mudan's gone, and I don't need Synchro Monsters or levels anymore. I cut down the Link Cross and decided to play Borrelsword Dragon, which I used to play prior to playing Dark Dragoon. This card just ends games out of nowhere. Access Code Talker, I'll mention, is phenomenal. I mean, I love this game. This card has won me a lot of games that I did not think. Originally, I was kind of skeptical about this card. I was like, I held on to it because I pulled one. I thought it was good. I saw the value, but I never saw myself playing it, and then I tested it around, especially with Area and Needle Fiber. It's just so easy to go into. So awesome, definitely worth playing, but you don't win games all the time. Whereas Borrelsword, when I played both of these two, or played Borrelsword first, I realized Borrelsword actually ends games out of nowhere. You're able to bring back monsters for free, like Spore, or, you know, bring out a Rose Girl for free, turn that into defense position, and just kill your opponent, even through Dragoons, which is kind of funny because you're able to gain all your opponent's attack, or have their attack, and gain that attack back, and then attack again. So very powerful card. Don't underestimate it. It's just an insane powerhouse, and if you can fit it in the extra, I still think you should be playing this OTK enabler. And with that, we've successfully built Rikka Plant Link. Special thanks to anyone who watched the video in its entirety. I know it's a long haul, even with the new chapter system, but hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and let's jump right into the alphabetical profile. Starting off here with the monsters, we have triple Evil Thorn, triple Jester Confit, triple Lone Fire Blossom, double Predaplant 𝕿𝖆𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖓, and a lone Ophrys Scorpio. Then we have triple Primula the Rikka Fairy, triple 𝕮𝖓𝖊𝖓𝖙𝖊𝖓𝖐. Then we have triple Rose Girl, one Spore, and one Rose Lover. And then we have our three vanillas in Psyframe Driver, Dark Magician, and Red Eyes Black Dragon as our engine requirements. Then for our spells, we have one Called by the Grave, Emergency Teleport, double Forbidden Droplet, one Instant Fusion, Monster Reborn, 1-for-1, Red Eyes Fusion, and triple Rikka Glamour. And then for traps, we have triple Infinite Impermanence, and that about wraps everything up in terms of the main deck. 40 cards all in total there. And then for our extra deck, we have one level 4 fusion for our instant fusion in Mud Dragon of the Swamp. We have Red Eyes Dark Dragoon because this card's too good not to play. One totally awesome that we're going to cheat off of our Bahamut Shark, an Abyss Dweller, and a number 41 𝕿𝖆𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖓, the Terribly Tired Taper, to go along with our Bahamut Shark. Then we have Link Kuriboh at link 1, Aromatherapy Jasmine, Cross Sheep, Crystron Halqifibrax or Needle Fiber, Area the Water Charmer, Gentle, Predaplant 𝕵𝖇𝖊𝖐𝖑𝖊𝖓𝖐 as our link 2s. We're skipping link 3s because they don't make a huge impact in this deck as far as I've seen. And then for our link 4s, we have Access Code Talker, 𝕿𝖆𝖇𝖑𝖊𝖓𝖐, Bow of the Goddess, and Boral Sword Dragon for, of course, our 15-card extra deck. That's it for now, but feel free to grab one of these videos on your way out. If you really enjoyed what you saw today, remember to subscribe to JD Gaming for more Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Thanks guys, this is JD Gaming, hope you guys enjoyed as always, and I'll see you guys next time.